Thank you.
How about now? You see my slide?
Yes.
And
Yes, Professor Ulugbek, we can see it.
oh yeah. All right. Yeah. First of all, thanks for inviting me. It seems like I don't see the comments while I'm giving a talk. So if anybody has a question or anything we want to talk, we can leave it at the end, or if something quick, you can ask as I go. I was preparing this talk and I was thinking like I had too many things to say, and I think this is one of the reasons I'm active on social media is that there are so many things I want to talk about, and this is normal for professors. If anybody has met a professor, we love to talk. But today I decided to focus on one thing, and I think that thing is related to my background, but also my path. Okay, and I hope it will be interesting or lead to some thought around this topic because it's perfect topic for the association that tries to unite Central Asians, including people from Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan. And I think that's something that can resonate. So I grew up in Tashkent and I had a relatively unusual career for someone from Uzbekistan or even Central Asia. Now, the reason I know it is clear whenever I meet somebody in academically or my colleagues, they always say, oh, Uzbekistan, I haven't met many people. But another reason it's obvious is if you just look at how I had to build my career, it's going to include a lot of movement. I had to go through a lot of movement to be able to reach where I'm now. And it's not even finished. My career is still ongoing. I'm pretty active. But you can see it went all the way from Uzbekistan, Europe, and many states in the US and so on. And what's important here, and this is going to be one of my threads of my talk, is just thinking about this, the thinking about my path, how unusual it has been, and trying to connect it to what's happening now in the world with AI. So if you think about Central Asia has roughly the same population as Germany, all right? Central Asia is like roughly 80 million people. Germany have roughly 83 million people. And if you were in my position and you would look around, you would see that Germany is a major contributor to global AI research, but Central Asia is almost invisible. And here I just put one metric, so I just downloaded adjusted research publication. If you look into this metric all the way to like 80 something countries, you don't see a single Central Asian country. And of course, it's clear that US and China dominate. Those two are very different than the rest. But then you see other countries, the second countries like UK, Germany, Canada, Singapore, many of them smaller than Central Asia. Some of them are the same size as Central Asia, being pretty visible. Now, if you look at the fundamentals, the situation is quite interesting. So the region, so Central Asia, is very large and resource rich. I mean, we can argue about how equally those resources distributed, but still, it's a very rich region by large, if you look at it. It has very young population. Median age is less than 30. So you can look at this curve, which tries to look at prediction, and you can see 30 is here. So the median age of the countries is relatively low. And it has strong education in math and physics, and we all kind of feel it. And with social media, I see it more and more as, math competition, Olympiads, everything is becoming very popular, right? So in some dimension, it's actually quite better positioned than countries that dominate global AI research. But then if you look at outcomes, how can we measure it? So publications, labs, presence, top conferences, the region is almost absent. So here I just took NeurIPS 2025. So NeurIPS is one of my favorite conferences. It's one of the top 3 conferences in AI. And I put the things they published last year where they put all the kind of top participants. And you can see this left-hand chunk is China. It's big and dominant, like a lot of Chinese universities. The yellow here is the US. You can see Google, Meta, MIT, traditional US powerhouses in machine learning. Here you can see the rest of Asia, right? You can see Singapore, Korea, right? This actually Mila in Canada, so the rest of the world. And then you can see Europe. So there's EPFL, that's my university, Oxford, Germany, which is TU Munich, ETH Zurich, right? Those are the biggest contributors to AI research. But if you really look at there, Central Asia is really invisible there. And that's something I wanted to kind of talk about. So the question is like, why? Why is this the case? And this is, I think, a very interesting question and a very pertinent question at our age where engineering, AI research is so important. All right. The answer from my perspective is actually very simple. And this is something I think relates from both system perspective, but also individual perspective as humans. The difference is not talent. I don't think talent is a problem. It's whether there is a system that converts talent into research output. And that's basically, from my experience, comes down to three things. And those three things I want to discuss. The first thing is visibility. The second is access. And third is feedback loops. And I think it's very important we kind of go over those three things. All right. So visibility, what do I mean by it? So visibility means you cannot aim for something you don't see. And this is one of the reasons I try to be active on social media. And for this one, let me tell a quick story. And the story is from David Foster Wallace, and I shared it recently on social media as well. Two young fish are swimming in the sea, and then across them comes an older fish and asks, "Hey guys, how's the water?" So two young fish continue swimming, and after a while, one turns to another and says, "What the hell is water?" Right? And David Foster Wallace used this as a metaphor to mention what I want to talk about, which is visibility of things we can see. So if you're in a milieu, in a place, you don't always see what's a reality. You see the projection of the reality, okay? The point is very simple. The most important things around us are often the hardest to see. If nobody around it publishes at the top AI conferences, then those things don't feel like real options. They feel distant, they feel abstract, and you will basically not be able to do. You might be very talented, you might be working hard, but you're optimizing without a clear target. Now, this is a technical plot I put here. The point being, this is kind of an optimization landscape that could reflect the life. But if you don't know what you're optimizing, a clear target where you're trying to get, it's not a good idea. And visibility is basically something we need to be able to see. And luckily, in the modern world, we can kind of address it. I'll get back to this later. The second important thing is access. Okay, most research careers are not built alone, they're transferred through networks. That's an important point to understand, that a lot of things that made possible come through mentors, collaborators, internships, recommendation letters. These are not peripheral things. Okay, this is a system. Okay, being able to understand the system and access the system is very important. If you're in a strong environment, like I managed to get into, like many of you are, based on the comments, you're always a few steps away from someone who has already done what you want to do. All right. So let me give you an example. You want to be a research scientist at Google. Well, one of my PhD students has just became a research scientist at Google a few months ago. Then because he's in the university we are in, he knew people who are research scientists at Google, right? So it was relatively easy for him to conceptualize the idea and to get information how to get into this. And at this moment, I also want to share a great story by Quentin Tarantino. It was in one of the podcasts that I was listening to. He was telling that he always loved movies, but he watched movies, okay? But he always wanted to make movies, and he didn't know how to do it. But basically, one day he decides to just drop everything and move LA. He had no clear idea, but he decided to move to LA. And he couldn't even afford a house in LA. He had to go to suburbs LA, pretty far away. But what he says is that suddenly it gave him possibility to meet right people, start writing scripts, and he started basically talking to people who were in the movie industry. And if you listen to the podcast, I highly recommend, I can try to dig it out. He basically says that basically suddenly turned him from a movie lover to a movie maker. He's something he wanted to do, but before he moved to LA, he just didn't have the right access. Okay, outside of that system, you are much further away. Okay, and if you don't, and often you don't even know what the steps are to get started. All right, the third one is probably the most important. It's a combination of visibility and access. It's a feedback loop. So this is where things really diverge. So once you enter a strong system, progress starts to compound. Okay, what do I mean by this? Well, if you're in a strong system, you work with strong people. If you work with strong people, you learn faster. If you learn faster, you produce better work. If you produce better work, you get more opportunities. If you get more opportunities, you work with strong people, right? And this loop just keeps on reinforcing itself. This is called a feedback loop. And if you're in the system, you will not, without even realizing, you start getting better. And by the way, this doesn't apply only to people. It applies to countries. It applies to regions. It applies to everything. Once there is this feedback loop, things become unbeatable. And this is what probably makes the US pretty unique in many ways, all right? Before that, if you're not in a strong system, opposite can happen. You work in isolation, you get weak or delayed feedback, you spend time on the wrong problems, because you sprung on the wrong problems, nobody's interested in them, you work in isolation, and this thing keeps on reinforcing itself, okay? So that's very important to be in a right feedback path, because this gap between a strong system and a weak system is not fixed. It's not static. It compounds over time. Small things get added to other things, and the reaction gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is why for countries in Central Asia, it's so hard to catch up with countries like United States, Germany, and so on, because this feedback loop just keeps pushing those countries forward, and the gap just can growing. All right. When I say Central Asia is underrepresented, what do I really mean? What I really mean is that the system that converts talent into outcomes is either missing or incomplete. So the real question is not whether talent exists, which we know it does. The real question is, how do you go from outside the system to inside the system, both from a country's perspective, but individual perspective as well, right? And this is where my own path starts. And I wanted to spend a minute to describe my past briefly, not because it's unique, but because it illustrates how this transition can actually happen, okay? I grew up in Tashkent. Like many people, I was pretty good at math, okay? I was pretty good at it. I cannot say I was bad at it, okay? Which in our system usually means I solve problems, but you don't actually know where that leads, okay? You know you're pretty good at math, but you don't know what to do with it, okay? And the first major transition was leaving Tashkent. And pretty early, I realized that I needed to do that. I was 17 years old at Westminster University, where I realized that I needed to enter a much stronger academic system. And luckily, it happened to be EPFL, but there are many other schools that are as strong as EPFL. It just at that time, that was a school that admitted me, and that gave me a chance. And this is where something important happened. Suddenly, I could find opportunities everywhere without really trying too much. I studied well, but suddenly I could do research. I could meet professors. I could see that being good at math can translate to doing something interesting with it, okay? At the beginning, of course, I optimized for the wrong things because, again, I was naive, I was lost. I thought research was about being smart, working hard, eventually figuring things out. Don't get me wrong, those are important. But in reality, it's a lot about choosing the right problems, having a good taste, getting continuous feedback. There was a long period where I was confused, but luckily I was 18, I was 19, I was studying, I was learning, which by the way is very normal state in research, but nobody tells you that. You can work on something for months and still not know if the question is even well defined, okay? So the first real progress didn't come from working harder, it came from better alignment with the system, okay? I started getting better problems, okay? I started hearing about internships. I started hearing things I can do. I started getting better guidance. Here I put photograph of one of my mentors who had probably one of the biggest influences in my life. It's Martin Vetterli. He was later a professor at EPFL, but at that time he was just a professor in computer science, and he was very generous with his feedback, and his feedback allowed me to navigate the system pretty well. Once that happened, things started moving faster and faster. Through Martin Vetterli, through his students, I managed to get a chance to go to MIT. That's a dream for many engineers, right? At some point, I realized something simple. This is not a random process. This is a structure. This is how research careers really evolve, okay? And once you understand that structure, the probabilities change dramatically. The probability of becoming a top-notch researcher go from 0 to something positive, something achievable, all right? Which brings to something what I actually really work on, okay? I wanted to talk to you about what I do. What is my actual research, and let me spend a minute on it, because in many ways my research is about the same idea. How do you combine structure and data to solve hard problems? Okay, so many problems in science have the same form. Okay, we want to recover something. Okay, in my case it's usually images. So here you see a three-dimensional image. It's an image of an algae. I want to recover it. Okay, but unfortunately I cannot have this image. Only thing I can do is build a microscope and measure something. This is my measurement, okay? So we observe something, but it's only indirect observation of what I want. If anybody likes Sherlock Holmes, and I'm a big fan of Sherlock Holmes, he has this thing called method of deduction, okay? He says, anybody go from A to B, B to C, and C to D. That's easy. The problem is, if you're at D, how do I go back to A, okay? He called one a forward process, so in this case, going from X to Y, that's going to observation. The inverse process, and he called this method of deduction, is to making assumptions about environment to go from Y back to X. Okay, and that's what I'm interested in. And in a mathematical way, we call it an inverse problem. Okay, the forward problem is going from X to Y. That's what we measure. An inverse problem is to go from Y to X. Okay, let me give you a concrete example. This is very useful in MRI. Okay, why? Because in MRI, we don't directly observe the image we want. We want to see somebody's head, but we cannot observe it directly. What we do is we measure signals, what you see on the left. Okay, and from those signals, we want to reconstruct the image. Okay, the problem is we get those signals sequentially and indirectly. Okay, which means it's directly the quality of the image you're going to get is proportional how many signals you collect. The longer I scan you, the better the image. The shorter I scan you, the worse the image. Okay, but the problem is we don't want to have long scans for many reasons. And let me show you an example. So this is a scan of somebody's liver. If I do a full scan, in this case, it's roughly half an hour. You can see this person is breathing. There's a motion here. It's one slice in 3D. It's pretty good quality, but it takes a long time. If I try to go to 2-minute scan or 1-minute scan, the image quality drops. And my job and my research is to try to go from quick scans, that's my observations, to a full scan type of quality. And how do we do it? We use AI. Okay, how do we recover something we never directly observed? Well, traditional people try to use mathematical models. They assume structure, smoothness, sparsity, or solve an optimization problem, right? More recently, people use AI, artificial intelligence. So what do? We build like deep neural networks that can try to learn a mapping from a bad quality images to a good quality images. So models learn from data what images should look like. Okay, this works better, but introduces new problems. Okay, now we have two extremes. On one extreme, we have structure without enough flexibility. Those are classical models. Okay, if you use only physics, this is one extreme. On the other side, we have data without enough guarantees, so only data. That's the other extreme. Okay, so my work is about combining the two. Okay, my team at Wisconsin Madison tries to do two things. We want to use physical models of instruments, but also we want to combine with generative AI models. We want to get AI reconstruction, but that's guided to realistic solutions. Okay, and to do this, we don't look at images as a single image. We model a set of all plausible images. We call it distribution of images. So you can see images are structured and they live in some kind of high dimensional structure, which we don't directly know, but AI can actually teach us something about that structure. Okay, then we ask, which of those images are consistent with what we measured? Let me give you a specific example. This is an MRI scan of me. So here you see actually my brain. So it exists, which is a good news. On the left-hand side, you see a quick scan, which is traditional method people use to get it. This is called grappa. You can see there are many artifacts. This is only 1 minute, 12-second scan, which is about 10-fold acceleration of the image. And on the right-hand side, I do what I explained to you. I combine the physics of the MRI device with the AI understanding of possible brain images. And by combining the two, we can get very high quality images from very quick scan. All right, again, the same idea appears. You don't rely purely on data. You don't rely purely on assumptions. You combine both. And interestingly, the same principle applies to careers. So let me end this with a few practical observations for people who joined this call. First observation, we got to optimize for environment, okay? Working hard in the wrong environment is much less effective than working in the right one, right? So here I just show you two examples. If you're working hard in a place which doesn't have universities, but you want to do engineering, you can work as hard as you want, but it will be very hard to do high-end research in engineering. On the other hand, on the right-hand side, you see UW Medicine, which is a place where there is a strong university system that opens the doors for engineering students to actually excel. Okay, that's a first practical observation. The second, get early feedback. Don't spend months optimizing in isolation. One good piece of feedback can save you weeks. All right, so this is a good thing to keep in mind, that you don't have to be working in a cave. You can actually reach out to people and through the association like the one we're participating today, that can actually give you access to many people who know what you're going through, but can give you the right feedback. All right, the third is learn how the system works, how papers are written, how collaborations are formed, how people get opportunities. And this is much easier now than when I was a student because now there is a social media. And one of the reasons I open threads and I actively participate is because I can actually write about the system. Sometimes it looks like naive or banal for some people, but it is not because there are many people who are interested, don't even know where to get the first source of information. And in my opinion, this is rarely taught, but it is critical. We got to understand the systems to be able to excel in them. 4, don't confuse intelligence with progress. Many smart people get stuck because they work on the wrong problems. I remember when I asked my advisor, PhD advisor, what is the best PhD student he can imagine? He said the best skill for PhD is not getting stuck. All right. So you can be very intelligent, but if you're not resourceful, that's my favorite word in English, you might get stuck. But instead, you might get stuck in a wrong problem. So it's a very important skill. And the fifth advice is be patient with confusion. If you're not confused, you're probably not aiming high enough. And especially in research, confusion is the reality. It's not the afterthought. It's a main part of the research enterprise. All right, let me end where I started. Central Asia has around 80 million people, strong students, strong foundations. The issue is not talent. The issue is building systems that convert that talent into visible outcomes. And once you understand how those systems work, the path becomes much more realistic. Not easy, but no longer invisible. And this is one of the reasons I'm talking to you today, one of the reasons I'm active on social media, and one of the reasons we all understand we need more associations that bring us together to share us possible path for joint success. With that, I thank you all for joining this call. I thank my team. You can find me on social media. You can find my email very easy online. And with this, I'm going to end my talk. Thank you.
Wow, Ulugbek, that was amazing. Really appreciate it. I think everyone can feel this atmosphere and the work that you did and prepared everything starting from your career and moving back to your research, and really appreciate one of these most liked talks
Thank
that
you for
I have
inviting me.
so far. So now we will go to Q&A session, guys, and I highly recommend use this opportunity to ask your question. If you're hesitant to say in English, just jump around, say in Uzbek or say in Russian, wherever you're comfortable. So first, I will go to two questions from our audience. So one is the more research related to Professor Kamilov's research. So first question is they ask like. If you had redesigned MRI from scratch today using modern AI, the current state of AI, what would look completely different? Like what would look completely different from if we use today's knowledge and today's opportunity of redesigning MRI? Thank you. Very broad question.
This is a fantastic question. But you know, what I showed you about MRI, it seems like I gave it like a 1 minute, but there were several Nobel Prizes in there. Okay, there were
Yeah.
several Nobel Prizes in there. It wasn't a thing. Understanding the physics of it, going to a mathematical modeling, it's non-trivial enterprise. MRI was a big invention. Now, with modern imagination, a lot of the things would be even there, non-trivial to redesign. Okay, what do I mean? AI is useful, but it wouldn't replace the physical reality of the MRI scanning system, right? That's where the Nobel Prizes came from, right? Now, how would that we redesign? And that's what I'm working on. My main focus of redesigning is the following, and I'm not the only one. There are people like me working across the world, across the US on the topic. We know the AI, we know the physics of MRI, okay? Right now, what we do is we collect the data with traditional perspective and then we process that data, okay, to extract the information. The question is, can we directly collect the information we care about without going through the long loop, okay? It's a non-trivial question, but there are some answers, and that's what we're chasing.
Mm. Thank you. Yeah, I think it totally makes sense of yeah, absolutely a lot of Nobel laureates come from designing of MRI machine, and yeah, I'm looking forward what will be in from clinical standpoint in the future, how MRI technique will change. So another question also, so it's more like this your career and personal journey. So you've worked across academia, industry, and applied domains. What mindset shift was important when moving from, let's say, theory to real world impact, or let's say from industry to academia? Thank you.
Yeah, so this is a great question. The move between industry and academia is non-trivial, and everybody who has tried it understands it. But it's also an important one. Okay, my guiding principle has always been one thing: it's to be able to do research at the level I want to do, which means be able to direct the questions I care about. I always wanted that independence, but also in a strong system, right? I tried to convey this point of a strong system, like entering a strong system has always been my mind, right? And this is still now, okay? Now, what changes between industry and academia is in industry, you're much closer to the products, okay? You want to try to ship product. Even if you're a researcher in industry, you're always driven by the products, which is a fantastic thing to understand, makes it real. But it constrains you. It limits the problems you can work on. If you move to academia, okay, you're no longer constrained by that specifically, right? But you're constrained by other things. You don't have infinite budget to draw big projects. You need to hunt for money, right? Anybody who knows professors know they go for grants. We go for grants not because it's a torture and we're masochists. No, because we have ideas, we want to realize those ideas. We go for money. In industry, the money comes directly from business units because you're aligned with the company. In academia, you try to align the world to your questions. It's slightly different paradigms.
Thank you, Ulugbek, for this answer. I think it
I hope
makes
I
sense.
answered the question, but
Yeah, no, I think at least people will have this feeling. Yes, maybe some of our audience may be doing PhD or postdoc and planning about the industry, but you experienced like you did PhD industry and after that came back to academia with new perspective. I think it's very interesting. Another question from
by the way, if
John.
anybody is interested, it's a large, difficult question. I'm very happy to connect with people about that topic of how to correctly put industry into academic career. It's non-trivial topic.
Yeah. Yes, I think it's yeah, another thing we will maybe in the future we will do another session. Another question from Otajan. Otajan Yuldashev, Otajan, can you please unmute yourself and say okay, where are you joining us and ask your question? Thank you.
Yeah, hello there. So, I'm doing a bachelor's degree in computer science basically, and I'm more curious about like data engineering for artificial intelligence and for medicine and for finances. We know that the data engineering is like a crucial. We call it like an image engineering, I guess, in the artificial intelligence. What are the most be answered questions in the like MRI image processing, like since it understands the numbers, right? Like, is there any
I didn't
technique?
completely get the question. Could you repeat it, Atajan?
Mhm.
I mean, like, how we talking about how the data is stored and collected for AI, right? So, like, I know that for traditional engineering, it would be like put the financial data in lake houses and relational databases and stuff. And how about for the specifically for the artificial intelligence, if you're working with the images, let's say?
Okay, so I'm going to answer a question in a way that you might not fully appreciate because it seems like you work with relational databases and actual data
Yeah,
structuring.
yeah.
But I'm going to answer it from AI perspective, and this is how I think. Okay,
Hmm.
how do I think? I think of imaging system. By the way, MRI is just one of them I work with. I work with many imaging systems. I think about them as encoders. They encode what I want in some kind of format, and that format comes from physics. Okay, that's physics-driven encoding. We have some degrees of freedom to control it. I can actually talk to an engineer and say, hey, tweak this knob and tweak this knob. Let's change the sequence you're going to collect the data, right? What I want is a decoder. Okay, a decoder takes that data and extracts information that the doctor can use. Okay, that's a decoder. Okay, right now, encoders are designed separately from decoders. People who build machines build them because of traditional ways. And the decoders are guys like me who kind of think about, okay, we have those AI tools, how can we better decode it? And of course, the future is integration of encoding and decoding. And that question is already like one of the first question here was asked in that direction. So we kind of need to think about the data is what's a good way to encode it such that it's good for storage, good for computation, good for AI models. And so we extract without problems the information we care about. And that information will be different for different applications.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Atacan, for your question. So we going to second question. Here's Yash. So Yash, please, can you unmute yourself? Say where you're joining us, PhD, postdoc, or professor, and ask your question directly. Thank you.
Sounds good. I think I kind of know Professor Beck from WashU. So what I kind of want to ask is, as a PhD student, finding the right task can be difficult. So how do you find a balance between taking on problems that develop your skill set versus finding the right problem to tackle? Because as a younger PhD, I kind of am trying to keep that mindset of develop skills right now, don't worry about problems, and kind of learning from your mentors. Um, but then eventually, I assume you need to find that transition, that balance towards the problem that you're interested in. So to kind of understand when and how to do that is what I was curious about.
I mean, Yash, your question is like $1 million question. Like, if we knew this answer very clearly, right, the PhD programs would be 1 year instead of 5 years, because it is indeed the toughest part. I mean, there are two tough things for PhDs, by the way, if anybody asks my opinion. One is like learning how to turn into a researcher. That's one. But the second is transition from a PhD to finally full-time scholar, right? How to become a professor, or how there's a discontinuity there. We all see it. There's kind of a discontinuity that happens there. For your question, like how do we balance the research targets to just the learning the skills? The magic roughly happens after 3-4 years of PhD. Okay, so how does that magic happen? The magic happens by you reading enough papers, one, trying enough projects, two, taking a few classes, and talking to few mentors. At some moment, by hearing those things, and your inner voice inside of you will be guiding you and saying, oh, this is bullshit. Oh, no, but that's interesting, right? And you'll kind of start forming your own taste. And that taste will create this loop where you start asking a question, which will force you to open a book, which will give you some answer and open a new question. And as an example, I can give you this thing, like roughly at around 4 years of my PhD, I read this terrible book. I mean, it's a wonderful book, but called Monotone Operator Theory. Okay. When I talk to my colleagues, they all say like, oh, you've read that book? I hate that book. I know it's like pure math. It's like very abstract. Now, why did I do it? At some moment, I realized there was a question, very interesting question, and I didn't have a skill. So I started reading it. But because I was reading it for my own question, I was so interested in reading it, which suddenly taught me something new. Once I learned something new, I got a hammer, right? And then I go reverse. I start finding nails. And then that essentially, yes, if you think about it, my first position was really tenure track position was that story that came out of this book. Now, the question is, how do I identify it at WashU? You're surrounded by smart people. You're already smart because you're doing PhD at WashU. Now, the question is combining those with the time, I think. It will eventually happen with the right mix. I mean, you're in much better positions than people who don't have access to this system around you. Yeah, sorry, it's a deep question, but I tried to give my best answer.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for this question. It was really great. Another two questions from Roshan by Salva. Roshan, please unmute yourself. Please introduce very shortly where you're joining us and your question. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Roshan. I'm joining from Canada. I'm master's student at the University of Waterloo. Thanks for your really impressive talk. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And yeah, my question is like before. So I'm doing research. I just finished my first year and then I answered some questions, but yeah, I just ended up with the situation that I wanna do more, I wanna know more. So how we can identify where to stop and how like formulate the good questions.
So how to formulate good question again? That's $1 million question, right? Like if I formulate the right question, I'll be a Nobel laureate. I wish I could. And we all hunt for it. It's a very good question, by the way. No criticism for the question. Now, in your situation, we talked with you a little bit because actually Raushan is one of the people I connected through threads, and we even discuss like a monthly basis now about research, which is very interesting through social media, right? We connected on real life through social media. It's a fantastic example. But in your case, the path is pretty clear. You're fascinated by something, you're interested by something, you just want to keep on going in that path. This is what I was maybe 10 years ago, right? And what's going to happen in your case is because you're interested in that path and you're already in a right situation right now, it's going to start accumulating, just kind of start adding up the questions and the answers. And you're going to, without noticing it over time, I think you're on a great path to turn this into a great research career because you already see the system. Unlike many people, you are in the system, you see it. That's why you're asking those questions. And from my interaction with you, it's pretty clear that you see the system. You're in the matrix already. Now the question is whether you like it later, you will not like it, you want to leave it, right? But I think so long you like it like I am, I absolutely love it, just keep on going with it and it will open new doors and new doors will open new doors and so on. You'll just continue.
Thank you so
Roshan,
much. Yes.
Roshan, thank you for your question. Very good question. And next one and last question. So we have 5 more minutes. So Bota Dusianbai, please Bota, unmute yourself, introduce and ask your question. Thank you.
Hello. So thank you for your talk. Do you hear? Okay. So my
Bota,
question is like,
can you make
you,
a
yes,
little bit higher?
volume?
Yeah, we cannot hear you. Like your voice is very low. Can you like a little bit up? Thank you.
I don't know if how to do it, but anyway.
Now good. Now good.
Okay, I'll try to put it like this. Anyway, so my question is like, how do you choose like how to choose the problem to tackle? Because I wish we've talked like months ago, but still, because I'm joining from Rome actually, so very a little bit of background. So I did in the industry, then I did a research fellowship in Rome in National Research Institute. So I test the water to be sure that I want to do research. And then last 6 months I was applying and I actually get several positions like offers. And it was actually a very big challenge for me to choose a problem to tackle because all of them are like were within my interest and the community, everything was super nice. I went I get admitted to many nice places. So for me now, the question is like I don't know if I still have one more choice to make, and the problem is like how to choose. Like, do you would you bet something like that would make would have a potential to make to become a big through, or would you like be more on a current relevance and of the topic? What would you choose?
This is a fantastic question, and then I'm going to answer one way. And then actually, I heard the similar version of question in other previous question as well, but I'm going to answer differently. What I'm going to say is that choose by people, not problems. Okay, so what do I mean by this? If somebody comes to me, let's say I'm considering a PhD, a postdoc, an undergraduate research project, and there are three options. Okay, one is like AI, some fancy thing. A second thing is like, I don't know, a physical modeling for the third, and then third is like a mixture of the two, right? What I would do, and I have done all my life, trust me, I pick based on which advisor I like, which team I like, and where I would enjoy my life more. Okay, so what do I mean by this? Choosing by projects is a risky business. Projects come, projects go. Flavors change, research moves on. But what you want is an advisor who is there for you, okay, who's gonna support you through your career. You want colleagues, PhDs, who are happy, nice, will be successful. Like if you looked at my PhD brothers, let's say, who were with me in PhD, they're all at amazing places. I have a friend who is VP of technology at Microsoft Research. I have a friend who is in Harvard Medical School. They're all my friends. Why? Because we're together in a PhD as a happy team. Okay. And my PhD advisor is a guy I can call and say, hey, I'm struggling with this question. What do you think? Okay. I mean, he loves to go skiing, so he might not pick up, but he'll call me back next day and then he'll be like, okay, Beck, let's talk about your question. And he'll discuss with me. So to everybody, I give the same recommendation. Pick by people. Really, people is everything. And then questions. Okay? And then questions. So the way I tell to my own PhD students, first, you pick a system where you want to go. So you're in Rome. That's a great place. Italy is a great place. You will be in a fantastic environment. Second thing you pick is people in that place because you're already in a great place. And then after comes a project.
Okay, for the topic it's clear, but in sense of like it's hard to know the people like through the interviews, right? Like when you're in the process of like applying and everything. Is there any way to how would you find out that there are good people there?
Yeah, like I always tell this, if you know any other students there, invite them for coffee and talk to them. Okay. If you can look internet, LinkedIn, all their connections, look where they went, the people who were in that group, right? You kind of look at it. Another way is ask secretaries. Like when I was a student, I loved asking secretaries of professors about those professors because those were my favorite people to have lunch with. Like everybody knows that I would go for lunch with administrators in the university. Why? Because they knew so much about professors. I would say, this one is an asshole, this one is a great, right? You would hear about this. So you talk to other students, talk to other people if you cannot get the professor. And then you judge your intuition. Probably you have some intuition about whether that professor is nice or not. Try to make use of that intuition too.
Thank you. Thank you very much for question. And I think it was a great session. We almost finished in 1 hour. I really appreciate, guys, your questions. So before we finish, I think it's historical moment, a historic event that today we have this Uzbek scientific diaspora joining PhDs, postdocs, professors. And I will, if you mind, take a photo for the memory, and I will later send to Muhammad Ali. And guys, if you mind, just show yourself, and I will take a quick photo, and we will finish with that. Thank you. So 1, 2, 3. Again, 1. Let me adjust. 1.
Maybe you'll need to wait a minute before everybody.
Yes. So let me wait. Hold on. 1, 2, 3. And next one with everyone. Let me change this plane with gallery. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we have everyone. Yeah, second page, we have other guys. Okay, good. I believe, guys, today it was amazing session, at least for me. I know Professor Kamilov from social media a long time. I really like this, what his posts and he's sharing. So definitely you need to follow up to Professor Kamilov. And today it was amazing session with many insights, and I believe you need some time to digest it. So with that, we want to really thank Professor Ulugbek Kamilov for spending his morning with us and sharing this knowledge, sharing his experience, and really guide this next generation of scientific leaders wherever from your PhD from Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, or other Central Asian countries, in order to really train and have this kind of guidance from very experienced scholars. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Again, we, Kazakh International Science Technology Association, part of Global Central Asian Science and Technology Association, global professional scientific community of 500 PhDs, postdoc professors, and industrial R&D. Please sign up, become member, also connect with other Uzbek members, Muhammad Ali here. And I want to thank with that, and I'm closing our session. Thank you, guys.
Have a good day, everyone. Have a good night.